Advocating for your client with their school. If you're going to be working with children, you will likely interact with three main institutions in addition to the child's family: schools, the Division of Child and Family Services, and the courts. You should always expect to work with a client's school in some capacity. Your client spends a huge portion of their time at school. And if they are not successful at school, they are missing out on important academic and social development. Unfortunately, teachers and school administrators are not always as informed or helpful as we would hope. One school social worker for one of my clients with trauma stated, "He's just a bad kid." A principal for a client of mine once told me she doesn't believe in autism. So you should be informed on what laws and procedures schools have to follow in case you also find yourself working with an individual like those. Much of the following information applies from elementary school through college. Firstly, and this is just a nice thing to know, in schools, the confidentiality law is known as FERPA instead of HIPAA, but it's essentially the same. The second law you should know is FAPE. Every child in the United States is guaranteed a free and appropriate public education from kindergarten through 12th grade. It should be noted, this applies to public and charter schools, not private schools. If a child has a disability, the public school must provide accommodation or individualized instruction at their own expense. And a mental health diagnosis is a disability. Actually, the term disability is an extremely broad one for the purposes of accommodations. The fun circular logic is if a child needs an accommodation, that's enough to consider them disabled. Oh, and social emotional learning is considered curriculum, so recess and lunch are also times you can require accommodations. This is where 504 plans and individualized education plans, or IEPs, come in. A 504 plan is a legally binding contract between a child, guardian, and school that provides accommodations in school and all school-sponsored activities. A reasonable accommodation can be anything your client needs in order to be successful in school. I'm just going to say this one more time. Anything. If your client needs non-aversive light in the classroom, they have to find a way to replace the fluorescent lights. If your client needs an escalation cycle plan followed to the letter, they must. If, in your licensed clinical opinion, your client needs her entire classroom to be covered in purple polka dots in order to learn, they have to do it. Or they have to provide the child with compensatory services to make up for any education they missed because the plan wasn't followed. And the key here is that you, as the licensed clinician, are the person who tells them what your client needs. And they have to find a way to provide it. They might try to say no. They might say they can't do it or it's too expensive. But if, in your opinion, your client needs an accommodation in order to learn, the school can't say no. If the student is already on an individualized education plan, there's a section for accommodations. They don't also need a 504. But the same rules apply. And if your student is getting so behind in school because of their disability that they can't catch up on their own, there's testing the school has to provide to determine this. They will be given an IEP. And the special education teacher must also follow any recommendations you give within your scope of practice. So, if your client is not doing well in school, have the parent call a 504 meeting, and you should attend. If they're very behind, have the parent request testing for special education in writing and provide the parent with a list of accommodations and services the client will need in school. Then attend the meeting. If they don't qualify for the IEP for any reason, they can always have a 504. There's no qualification except that they need accommodations. If the school is not providing your client with what they need, contact a parent advocate to work with the parent and you to get your client what they need. And if that doesn't work, You can go to the district or state board of education to complain, which I guarantee will get you everything you want and more. Advocating for your client with their school is so simple as a therapist. They just have to do what you say. Now go out in the world and get all those kids what they need. Oh, and 504 plans apply in college too.